Dr. Jeff talks love, Dr. Jeff talks life, answers your questions, cuts through the strife. Sex and intimacy, real and true, evidence-based, made just for you.
Hello, welcome to Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Albaugh. As bodies change, so do the ways we experience desire, arousal, and pleasure. Today, you are joining us for episode 67. Wow, that's crazy. Beyond Penetration, Rethinking Pleasure, Intimacy, and Sex, where we're rethinking intimacy beyond penetration and opening the door to new, deeply satisfying possibilities. It's going to be a really interesting episode. Whether you're watching live or listening to the recording later, every single moment of your amazing life matters, and I count it as a true blessing and a gift that you have taken time to join us to improve your life. I sincerely thank you and want you to know that you are exactly what this podcast is all about. So welcome. We're connected across so many different platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If you're on X, you want to submit a question, go over to one of the other platforms, including Facebook, StreamYard, any of those. If you are a Facebook person, do us a quick favor and put us in your favorites. If you follow us or put us in your favorites, we can do more. The more people who follow us, the more we can do on Facebook. So always a good thing, and we appreciate you. Visit the website. If you want to learn more about upcoming episodes, you can go to the calendar, but you can watch 66 amazing episodes with all the awesome guests we've had on. Experts from all over the world have joined me to help you learn more about sex and intimacy. So go to the website. It's got a lot of good stuff. You can take us with you wherever you go. We are streaming with you. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on Amazon Music. We're on Spotify. If you're working out, we can work out with you. If you're on your road trip, take Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy along, and we are happy to travel with you. Learn about deepening your relationship as you travel the country. As always, I would like to just take a moment to remind you that all are welcome here. You, my friend, are so welcome here. Whatever your sexual orientation, your gender identity, or your relationship style, please know that this is a space for you. The mission of the podcast is really easy. It's simple. Every time I remind you, it is to empower and enlighten you with scientific-based information that improves your sexual health and deepens your relationships so you can live your one miraculous, wholehearted life more fully and with more love. So, this episode, sex really doesn't stay the same across a lifetime. And for many people, one of the most challenging shifts is when penetration becomes difficult, or it becomes painful, or simply it's no longer desirable. Whether due to aging, whether due to medical conditions, cancer treatments, hormonal changes, or shifts in desire, these experiences can leave people wondering, what does intimacy look like now? Why does this all feel so different? But too often we've been taught a very narrow definition of sex, one that centers on penetration as the main event. It is where we're headed, or even the goal. But what if pleasure is really about something different? What if changing bodies don't mean the end of satisfying sex life, but rather an invitation to explore new pathways? So today I am joined by Dr. Sara Sohn, a pelvic health physical therapist and a certified sex counselor who helps individuals and couples reimagine intimacy in ways that are creative, embodied, and deeply fulfilling. We'll talk about sensation-based pleasure, collaborative intimacy and how kink, which is often misunderstood, how that can actually serve as a structured, consensual, and playful way to reconnect with the body and your own body and with each other. So, if you've ever felt limited by traditional definitions of sex, or you're navigating changes in your body or your relationship, this episode offers a new lens, one rooted in, I love this word, rooted in curiosity, adaptability, and possibility. So if you'd like to reach out to Dr. Sara Sohn, you can reach her at www.drSarasohn.com if you'd like to reach out to her yourself. And I am so happy to welcome my colleague, and that is Dr. Sara Sohn. Welcome to the episode.
Hi, thank you so much for the warm welcome and also the smooth jazz. I am feeling really good now. That was really lovely.
Yeah, Vic does an amazing job with our podcast tunes, and also always fun things. So, but I'm so glad that you are here, and I'm so excited about your presentation tonight. What a great topic!
I can't wait. I am really excited too. I do want to make sure I am hearing a little bit of an echo on your end. Everything's good still? We're going good?
Yeah, I don't hear any
Okay.
echo at all. So we
Perfect.
should be good to go. And right now, I am going to hand it all over to you. So it's you and your presentation. I'll see you after your presentation in just a few minutes.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me again. Well, welcome. I am honored to be here for the first time. And if you are watching live or the recording, please do interact. I just love that feeling of knowing what was resonating, what people were thinking in the moment, what surprised them, what really landed. So please, whatever platform you're on, do interact. It leaves me with a lot of warm feelings to know where what's resonating. So, as Dr. Jeff mentioned, I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist and a sex counselor. I am in sunny Florida. I'm in North Florida. And I spend a lot of my time helping people with things like peeing their pants, pooping their pants, and issues with sex. And in doing that, we really learn the muscles and how to help people with these certain diagnosis, quote unquote. But the reality is that it's not just the reality is that it's not just the absence of pain or the absence of discomfort, but the presence of pleasure. And oftentimes in the work that I do, if somebody has a vulva, they would say, try some dilators or avoid the things that hurt. Or if someone has a penis, they would say, try to have an erection. And there's often not much in between that really is beautiful and fun and sensation based, and that's all what we'll be discussing today. And this really applies for any type of couple. So whether you are in a cis hetero relationship or same sex relationship, any type of relationship or dynamic, the things I'll be talking about today apply. So thanks for joining me and welcome. The main thing, if you get anything from today, is I want you to really consider this question. So, what if healing meant exploring what does feel good right now? I don't know if you've had any physical injury, your back, your left toe, your elbow, but what if healing meant not just the absence of discomfort, but exploring what does feel good right now? And what could that look like? So, for people that aren't familiar, usually the questions that I get when I do this talk are about pelvic health because people are really curious. You know, some people are so familiar with what I do, some people aren't at all, some people really understand the pelvic floor. So, I'm going to do a very quick pelvic floor 101 just to kind of explain that so that we can move through some of the things that I'm wanting to bring to you today. But the pelvic floor, in these images, everyone has one. It's not like only people with the vulva have a pelvic floor. All genders have a pelvic floor, and it is important for many different things. That's what I want you to get from these two slides. It's important. We call them the 5 S's, and I'd love if you had a pen and paper, if you try to think what they might be. So I'm going to say the most fun one that we're talking about today, sex, right? But they have other functions. So another S is support. So actually supporting the organs that are there. Sphincter control, so peeing, pooping. Stability, so the pelvis actually ability to feel nice and strong and not have things like back pain and pubic symphysis pain and things like that. And then sump pump is ejaculation. And these are common things that people will get diagnosed with if there's an issue with any of those 5 S's, right? So if you're having some pain, it might get diagnosed as chronic pelvic pain or prostatitis. If you're having a concern with the support, it might get labeled as prolapse. If you're having pain with sex, is sometimes labeled vaginismus, vulvodynia, vestibulodynia. All these sciencey words are not important for today. I just want to give you kind of a big understanding of the field and what people like me do. And then a big take-home message I want from this slide as well is, and I'm sure you've had so many different talks already about pain in the brain and this chronic alarm system. But if we think about something that is hurting, and that river, that pathway of water is flowing down this river, and it is going and it is going and it is going. And sometimes, and the longer it's going down this river, the deeper the I live in a flat place with no mountains, so I don't know why I'm using this metaphor, but the deeper the the river would get, right? So if we have a little bit of water that starts to trail off, we're making a new pathway. But it takes a while for that pathway to redirect all the water and for this one to dry out. And so sometimes when we have this river, it's a alarm system that has been going for so long that just a little bit of water kind of tells our brain that there is discomfort. And I look at pleasure or finding things that are feeling good as redirecting the water, redirecting that alarm system. So I am curious if you are a person with any pelvic floor concern, because there are so many, like I just showed in that slide. I didn't even cover all of them, issues with constipation, post-surgical. But if you've been given any of these advice. Okay, so I mentioned that I would talk about kink. So what is kink? And I encourage you, if you're like me and curious, to go onto Google and type the word kink, even if you're really familiar with kink, and see what comes up as the definition. And it always surprises me what comes up as the definition, because usually, and you could tell me if this has changed, because I would welcome this change. Usually what comes up, and I'm trying purposely to give you a little bit of time to do it yourself, so do pause me if you're listening to the recording, is a kink in a rope or something like that, but also this idea that it's perverse, something that's different or odd from what the usual typical things that people are doing in the bedroom. And I couldn't disagree more. So I wrote my own definition. So here we go. Kink is intentional sensations, power dynamics, and play designed to help someone feel more within a consented container of time. Intentional sensations, things that you're intentionally saying, in this container of time, we're going to play with hot, we're going to play with cold, we're going to play with binding, we're going to play with safety, we're going to play with impact, we're going to play with a feeling of sensuality or feeling of strength and dominance or feeling of submission, right? In those power dynamics, play, we're going to laugh, we're going to experiment, and it's to help feel more. That's the whole goal. Feel more pleasure, feel good in a consented container of time. And there's varying amounts. So oftentimes kink is depicted, you think of 50 Shades of Grey, or you think of these dark dungeon BDSM rooms and all of that. Wonderful. But there's so much more under the umbrella. And the idea is that it's to feel good in a certain container of time. And there's so many different flavors. So I like to think of something like spicy food. For some people, really spicy food is pleasurable, and another person, just a little bit of spice is pleasurable. And vanilla is the term that's often used for sex that isn't involving kink, has thousands of components. If you really learn about vanilla, so vanilla is delicious, and you can play with a lot of different kinks, even if you're not labeling it that way because that feels uncomfortable. So that's why I like this much more broad definition. It's all of the juicy things that you can do when something is hurting, when something isn't doing the thing that you're wanting it to do. That's not always depicted in the way that we view sex, right? Oftentimes we see sex, it looks like Fast and the Furious is what I call it. We see porn, they're like doing these very specific things that's how you do it, and magically everybody has an orgasm at the exact same time, and fireworks go off, and that is how you do it. And for porn is fun, but it's like watching Fast and the Furious and say, I'm going to be a great driver. It's not actually the recipe for meaningful, great experiences. And so that brings me to a question I love to ask, and I really encourage you to play along and to write down a definition of what good sex is. Pause me if you can, but what is good sex? How would you describe it? What does that look like? Does good sex, when you look at your definition, if you did pause me, is there certain body parts that had to be involved? Are there certain things that had to happen? What does good sex look like? And I oftentimes will encourage people to compare that to their best sexual experiences. And sometimes when they compare that to their best sexual experiences, there's a disconnect between their definition of good sex and their best sexual experiences. You know, sometimes during their best sexual experiences, there wasn't any pressure and there wasn't any orgasm. Even orgasm was denied. Maybe they were really into that. Or sometimes in those best sexual experiences, nothing was inserted, no toy, no penis, nothing, depending on what type of sex you have and with who. And it's really interesting to ask yourself, well, what made, I felt so seen. I felt so silly. I felt so in my power. I felt so novel. I felt this novelty. I felt this sensation. I felt present. I felt connected. I felt dangerous. Like I was this feral creature. I felt primal. I felt delicious. I felt exuberant. You know, there's so many different ways in which describing what is good sex to us is much more vast. And kink enables so much exploration in that. So this is my favorite metaphor, especially for people that are having any form of discomfort or something isn't working the way you want it to. So if you are that person, I encourage you to take a piece of paper and just write down what it is that you feel like makes it difficult for you to have good sex. Maybe for this example, I'm going to say my, vulva hurts. And if anything is hurting or not working well, I encourage you to see a pelvic floor physical therapist. But writing that down, and then the things that you've done so far to try to make that better, right? So maybe I changed positions. I tried more lube. I took this pill. I wore a cock ring. I don't know. All those different things. And oftentimes when we're moving just away from pain or dysfunction, we're still on this target of we're just on the outside of pain or dysfunction. So we're pretty close to it. And any movement away, we're still right there at that bullseye. And so I like to think of it, well, what if we looked at a different target? What does feel good and what would go on that target? And for a lot of people, this is scary. It's very challenging when I ask this question of what could go on that target. Most people, especially if they've been in chronic pain, everything feels like edge play. Everything feels, that word meaning unsafe. Everything feels unsafe in their body. Everything feels like sometimes it's just disconnected because it's just been so long. Have even asked that question. And so putting things on this playful target can actually be really challenging to think of what could go there. And so I encourage you to be patient if you try this and curious, like Dr. Jeff always says, of, okay, well, I'm not sure if this is on it. It might be really far on the outside. And then as I try it, maybe it's going to get closer to this pleasurable zone, but I'm curious, I'm open, and what all those things could be. And then re-ask yourself, well, what is great sex on this? What is involved? Maybe it's I'm wearing really casual clothing. It's not this like lingerie that makes me feel like I can't move. And there's a lot of sensory experiences. I'm listening to music while I'm wearing a blindfold. Like I like this blindfold called Music Cozy, and I don't sell it, I'm not plugging anything, but it plays music. So it's like this sensory experience, and someone's just touching my body in ways that I feel really sensory based, like getting really curious. And my favorite word, like Dr. Jeff, is creative. How I think when we can step into our imagination more, we have much better sexual experiences. Oh, okay. I'm seeing some questions come in. That's great. I can't wait. So my definition of great sex, I've put a lot of thought into this, is this model that I wrote. And I'm very proud of, to be honest with you. I love a good acronym. I have an acronym for everything, but I made sex into an acronym. And this is how I help people. So S is safety, what's feeling safe in your body. E is eroticism, what you like, even if you feel like it should be different, what's true and authentic for you. And the X is, if you want to guess, exploration. So how or why or when you want to explore this with another person, and great sex is right in the middle. This is my little definition. I'm very proud. So round of applause, please. Okay. So I'm going to give a few examples, and I don't like talking about people as like client or example, but for privacy reasons, these are real people that I'm going to be describing, and real people with full breadth of hobbies and individualism, right? That I don't want to be removed by describing very few details on a slide about this person, but I want the audience to see some examples of what I'm talking about and maybe even see themselves in some of the examples. So working with a person who had vaginismus, this is a diagnosis given to people that are having pain with insertion, and they really were trying to avoid pain to the point where every intimate encounter, even touch of other parts of the body, felt reactive, this like very strong reactive response, because if touch leads to something painful, why would I want to be touched? And so in the development of kind of exploring pain, we kind of played with what would it be like to be in control and look at pain as a sensation and not this terrifying thing that we're so afraid of happening. A sensation just like spicy food, that there can be way too much spicy food and we need to, drink some milk. Or we need to tone that down, or we need to revisit what type of I really need to come up with a better metaphor, because using curry as a sex metaphor is just not sexy. But but how can we play with this sensation of pain. So, what could it look like to play with it and find even pleasure in some of those sensations to feel more in control of when and how you're going to experience them? These were things like nipple clamps or impact play, which is a word for a broad sense of, a lot of people don't always know what kink is or can feel intimidating and taboo. And so, impact play can involve spanking, can involve toys. There's so many different forms. And so rethinking that, and it felt so powerful to say, this is the container of time that I'm going to experience this, and I know that it's going to go away, and to reorient her body to that sensation of not being so, and paired with working on reducing pain. It's not that we don't want to work on the cause of, my whole career is to help people not have pelvic floor concerns that cause pain, right? I'm not trying to gaslight anybody, their experience, or it's just part of the healing that I think is completely left out is accessing pleasure in many different creative ways that kink offers. I love this term from kink. It's really challenging to do this and speak to a wide variety of people in a small 20-minute sense of time. and cover all of these things. And so I just love the concept, if you want to take one that is often used in kink, of lab time. Lab time, let's say I'm using rope, and there's Japanese rope bondage is called shibari, and there's a lot to it. Some people use it for binding, some people use it for connection and intimacy, some people use it for just connection but it's not intimate. Some people, it's an art form and they use it just to take beautiful pictures. For some people it's a sensory experience. So there's so much to it. But there's a wonderful term that I love, which is lab time. And it's, let's say I'm learning something that's new. I'm going to practice it. And we're both, me and the other person, are consenting that that's what this is. We're experimenting, we're playing, we're practicing. It's not this like full immersive experience that has the pressure of sex or a scene. It's a time to explore and get creative. And I love that phrasing. I love taking that on of do you have any lab time where you're just, there's no pressure. There's nothing that means it's going to be good, it's going to be bad. It's just experimenting and trying different things that are around your house. Sometimes when people get new into kink, they have, and I'm one of those people, I love to buy things in the toy collector, but you really can use things in your house. And there's so many ways, Kink University, one of my friends owns that, and there's so many, there's ways to do things safely, and always do your research, of course, but, between rope and texture, something hot, something cold, go around your house. They call, the fancy word for this is, or not fancy, but the word that's used for this in these areas is pervertibles. So finding things in your house, a feather, a blindfold, I'm opening, because I do this to self-regulate just in general. So I'm like opening my drawers. I'm like, what do I have? Some oil, felt, getting different textures, and just trying and exploring with music, without music. What does it feel like in different parts of the body? Not just the genitals, the nipples, the armpits, the elbows, and getting really silly and creative. Another example, I'm a person that has diagnosed ADHD, and I struggle a lot with I call it neurosparkly or neuroseductive or whatever word that you want to put on it, but I struggle. And so this example is me, but I've had my own back injuries, multiple. And being a physical therapist, that can be a challenge. And so I've used rope for adaptive positions and rope play, but I've also found that kink in my own neuro spicy brain is a gateway to feel regulated and ready and receptive for touch. There's some great research on this by Leanne Bornman, and make sure I say her name correctly. Yeah, Leanne Bornman. I am all about, for people with ADHD, how kink can be a gateway and sensations that really help the initiation of play and intimacy. I was working with a male in his late 50s who had some cardiac problems and wasn't able to have an erection and was really curious about prostate play. And the word in kink is pegging, but any form of prostate play, but was so afraid that if he wanted to explore that what that meant to his partner was that he was not straight, or that it carried all of these taboos of just having sensation of a certain part of his body. Right. And so what I love about kink and what I love about it really helps us to question some of the labels. Well, why is that label given to experiencing pleasure in a certain sensation in our body? And what does that even mean if we find if we're having those type of discussions, why is that such a bad or scary thing? But it really opened up connection of these lovely conversations of like, well, how I'm feeling vulnerable of I'm really curious about exploring this thing, but I don't want to be judged. And how often do we feel like that in sex when we're wanting to try something new or explore something new? And it really opened up a way for them to connect. She was super excited about it and excited about being able to connect without the pressure that she was feeling, like when they really heard each other around oh my gosh, we have to have an erection for sex and it's hard and frustrating, and being able to explore other forms of sensation and play. So I am mentioning my book, one, because I'm excited about it. I just released it, but it's called Heart to Heart. You'll probably have to type in on Amazon Heart to Heart Dr. Sara Sohn because, I am self-published. And if you don't share your own work, nobody will share it for you. But I really break down in my book what I'm talking about in terms of how to have these conversations. A lot of the tools that I've talked about so far and we'll talk about the next few slides come from my book in this little ritual section. So I wanted to just show you this if you're wanting some more resources. I designed it to be a workbook that's very experiential and very comfortable with stories and pictures that were drawn by my lovely partner. By the way, he also drew the image on the first slide of me in glasses. I used to have bangs, long hair, and rainbow glasses, so that used to look like me. And he drew a lot of the pictures. So it's really a gift of love that I'm very proud of. But one of the things in it is building a pleasure parfait. So if you are creative, for me, creativity really helps me to get to know myself better. It really helps me to feel playful. It really helps me with pleasure. And so I love this idea of a pleasure parfait. And it's something you can take a bite of. It's something that can change. It's not like you have to make this pleasure parfait and can never do it again. But what in the foundation are ways that you like to feel? And so, like I mentioned before, a lot of people, it can be almost impossible to say, hey, I like to feel confident. I don't, like I say, they don't like to feel like breakable. Like, are you okay? Is everything okay? But they want to feel confident, or I want to feel seductive, or I want to feel this level of primalness, or have those words. So in my book, I do help with some different activities to give you that language if that doesn't come as naturally to you. But that's really the foundation in my for great sex, in my opinion. And having those words and being able to center pleasurable experiencing around how you want to feel is a really hard question, but also a simple question, which I love. I love simple but hard questions. And then thinking about, okay, what would be the fillings in this parfait? What would go inside? What type of things would I like to try? How do I check in? What are the toppings? Something I might be curious about, but it's not like has to happen. And what's that last bite? The things I do after that make me feel comfortable. And again, I really break down this activity in a much simpler way in my book. So I want you to leave with some tools that you can do just from this talk. But if it does feel a little overwhelming, I know that this can be I love that sex brings up so many different worldviews. And so I welcome all different worldviews. And so I want to welcome your worldview and your experience, which might be really different than mine. So if you think about kink that doesn't involve external sex organs, what are ideas that you have? So if you were to say, I'm kind of curious what that would look like. Here's just a few examples and a few ideas that I think are are kind of good ways to start if you're curious, or ways to even move more into, right? Because if you're already a person that's like, girl, I'm kinky, then here's some things. So sensory based, thinking about senses, right? Smell, touch, sight. How often people have sex and think, what is that room going to smell like? What is it going to look like? What is it going to touch my body? Like, what am I going to see? And really get into that sensory experience, which I love in kink. They call the word that's used is scene. And that's all about creating this sensory container, this sensory experience. So things like blindfolds, I mentioned the music cozy, love that. But headphones, feathers, there's senses like violent wand, which is this electricity, which is fun, temperature with body safe candles. If you are curious about anything, these things, please do reach out. I can help with finding the toys and the resources to do all of these things safely. What about power base? So these could be things like stillness, praise, commands. And obviously, when you're talking about sex, you're not there's intimate experiences by yourself. Like I have had great sexual experiences by myself, but when you're engaging another person, there's another person you have to consider when you're talking about anything, especially when you talk about power play, right? But what are different things that you could play with in there? Role play, maybe caregiver, handler, pet. There's role play of king and queen. And you can role play aliens. I have an example in my book about literally role playing aliens because not having sex with we weren't wanting to engage in genital play at the time, and so we used toys and we're like, we're aliens and this is fun, and we set the lights to blue, and it was just like silly and encouraging. So this is by no means an even partially complete list. So what are your ideas of ways that you're curious about that might involve external sex organs? If you take anything away today, it's this. Instead of avoidance or pressure to conform to what's the fast and furious societal versions of sex, how can you create experiences that are creative, consensual, pleasure based, and intimate to you and the authentic version of you, intimate to yourself and to another person? This is a QR code that hopefully should work if the to get to connect with me. You can also go to my website, and then this is my little book, and I'm open now to questions, and thank you for listening.
Wow, thanks so much. I mean, you really highlighted break out of the box, don't get, we create our own prisons and boxes of what it should be and what it's all about and things like that. And I think it's so important for us to remember that it can be whatever you think it should be and whatever both partners agree it should be, and just enjoying that journey and being curious and having fun exploring different ways of being pleasurable and connecting and things like that. I love too that you talk about play. I think play is highly underrated. In fact, we're going to do a whole episode on play with therapist Lena Elkab. That's episode 71, where she's going to talk about how play can transform sex. I think it's so important, and the lightheartedness that you bring to it and talk about, I think is really hard because sometimes we just take ourselves entirely too seriously.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, and hopefully I did okay with the time. But I think sometimes, especially when we have these words like kink and we have these very serious imaginations of leather, and it's what we're really talking about is, Midori is a great educator in kink and talks about that it's adult a childlike play with adult privilege, and I don't want to say her definition incorrectly, but adult privilege and rules, right? Like, so we're really just breaking down, sometimes it just feels good to let things go and just be a little silly and play with toys and get creative. And
Yes, yes. And listeners, some of you out there, if you're intimidated, you think, well, toys don't take over for anything. They just add to pleasure, right? They're not, it's like, oh, I've had patients who've said to me, well, now it's like you're going to prefer that to me. And it's like, no, it's to enhance pleasure, not to replace anyone or anything. So I think it's important to remember all these fun things are just to enhance pleasure and connection.
I love that you said that. My partner works with a lot of couples as well, and he was telling me that he was talking to a male that was feeling a little intimidated about toys and some of these things, and he was like, well, sometimes doesn't your hand get tired? Yeah, wouldn't it be easier just to have something to make your hand a little less tired? Or doesn't your tongue just get a little bit like overworked, and wouldn't it just be a little easier to have?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, that would be easier.
They're pleasure enhancers, not replacers. So just know that, listener. But I love the idea about play and introducing more play and fun into what we do in our relationship and in our sex play. And also I was thinking a lot about, I think it's so important for each of us to think about that. What is great sex for us? What would be the components? How do we build our parfait? How do we do those things? And I also really like, because of the performance thing, not so much for you to think about, but to think about with your partner. I like Michael Metz and Barry McCarthy. Barry was on the show before, talking about the good enough sex model, and really is like trying to move away from perfect performance to realistic connection, and trying to move away from, especially when we're thinking of with your partner, moving towards intimacy over a performance-based thing, and satisfaction with the goals of, did you feel connected? Did you have fun and have pleasure? Were you satisfied? And that really, we say, wow, then that was definitely some good enough sex. Great sex is wonderful too. I just think, too, listeners, we want to remind you, don't turn it into about performance. When we explore great sex together, it's not about you need to do better. It's about we can build something better together, which is always good.
Yes.
I did have a couple questions come in, and the first one is, my partner and I struggle because we have different ideas of what counts as sex, and we all know what that's like, and I've had clients who've said that as well. How can couples start to renegotiate intimacy in a way that feels validating for both of the people? I thought that was a good question.
That is a good question. And by the way it was asked, I feel like this person is doing this, right? Because you're already asking the question of, how can we renegotiate intimacy in a way that feels validating for both people? That's the answer. You answered your question. So I'm a little confused as the question that is answering itself, but that's how you do it. You ask, how can we do this in a way that feels validating for both of us? Because we both are wanting to have intimate, great experiences. And that might look like, you know what? I'm having a lot of blocks and I really feel like I just need a hug around this topic. I need to feel like I can pause around this topic. For women, I think what comes up a lot is I need to feel like I can be disruptive, meaning that this idea that I am allowed to advocate for something that I might want, that might be disruptive to the way that I think you want, or what the way that things are supposed to go. I'm supposed to pause and plan. And even in doing it in the negotiating or the discussion piece can feel really challenging of like, I want to be disruptive, as in say something that might differ, or say something that might be advocating for myself that feels like it's taking up too much space. And so it's a great question, but it's also a great answer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, last week Nicholas Mayo was on, and we were talking about sensate focus. And so, what if you take some of those things that you think typically count, like intercourse or penetration, off the table, and you say we can do anything but that, or we can't really genitals and intercourse are off the table, and what can we do, and how can we find pleasure and connection without some of the things that you might have previously thought that really counts as sex, because everything counts as sex if
Yeah.
it's pleasurable and fun. So that's another way you could maybe take that off the table, and that will help you to look at it differently. But I think too, the listeners sort of answered, you're already open to it, you're renegotiating it and just saying, so society defines sex very particular ways, but what do we think sex is, and what do we want our sex life to be about? And then maybe saying, let's take penetration off the table for the next week and just work on non-penetrative sex, whatever. But
So you're bringing up so in my book I have this, and this is a common tool that I think a lot of sex therapists, sex counselors will give, but that I just love, which, taking a piece of paper and writing down the things that are feeling. In kink they use this green light, yellow light, red light, right? But the things that are feeling like green, and be as silly and ridiculous. Green is tickling my inner thigh. Yellow, the yellow is usually the most important ones, but because that's like, sometimes I like this, sometimes I don't like you licking the inside of my elbow, or and then touching my butt at the same time. Like, be as ridiculous and specific as possible, and make these lists, and then kind of just have a conversation with that other person and see what are both green. And those are the only things that go inside of a jar, and you call it your pleasure jar. And let's say you're going to have an intimate experience. You can pick 3 things from the jar, and it might be something like tickle Sarah's feet. For another person, that might be a totally red. I don't mind being tickled, but tickle Sarah's feet, lick oral sex, and whatever. So there might, and you can say these are the things that are giving us just a starting, because sometimes it's a playground. And when you know that it's not just like what to avoid, but you actually know what to do, you're like, it can be a lot more fun to play into that.
Yeah.
And you literally make a physical jar.
I love
Pleasure
it. I
jar.
love our idea. That's a great idea. So lots of different ideas of what you could do. Good answers. So and you answered some yourself, listener. So the next question on the kink line there was, kink can feel intimidating or even taboo for a lot of people, as you said. How can my partner and I explore it in a way that feels safe, respectful, and aligned with their values, especially if we're completely new? Where do we begin, I guess, is the listener's question.
That's a great question. And I did try to make this accessible in my book. I call it the heart model. And it's a way to just have conversation around sex that I think centers pleasure, because I always found a lot of models centered the idea of of STIs, and really medicalize the conversation. And although that's part of the conversation, I struggled to find a model that really centered how you want to feel and pleasure. So I made my own, called the heart model. And I can break it down briefly, but the H is those type of things. It's health. So, STIs and barriers and all those kind of things. The E is that emotional experience that you're wanting to feel. It was on my slides as well. I can actually open it up. But the emotional experience of how you're wanting to feel, which, am I able to put it back? Oh, there we go. So that emotional experience that you're wanting to feel. A is awareness. So these are the things that you do before, during, after the green, the yellow, the reds of around your body, around sensations. And a lot of that, is, I like to simplify it because you can get really deep into that. There's yes, no, maybe checklists and all kinds of different things, but just being able to have a conversation around what I call awareness zones around the body. And then ritual, like what is that going to look like in terms of, maybe afterwards we cuddle, when we do lab time, when do we revisit this conversation? So I try to make a really accessible way to start to explore these things. There's also so many resources online, Kink University being one, and some wonderful educators specifically around kink, Midori, Callie Williams. I can think of so many that can help you with just starting those explorations. But I think I really tried to simplify it in a way that can feel safe, respectful, and aligned with values, because you're starting there, especially if you're new to it. And I'd say go slow. So you can probably remove the slide now, but sometimes what I've noticed with couples, that there's sometimes one person is so excited. It's like, you see me and now I can be a kitten and you're going to spank me. And the other person's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you talking about? That is not feeling okay to my values. I just said I was curious and and they feel so overwhelmed and overstimulated. So move at the pace of the mutual pleasure. Continue. You can start with, okay, maybe it's feeling that kind of pet like play, and that's the invitation, but some of the other things are feeling intimidating for another person, right? I think can be a really great start point of how you like to feel and where you can start mutually together.
And then I like too that on your slide you had talk, start communicating about sex. In the beginning, it may be awkward or whatever, but because our vocabulary sometimes is limited with sex, there's more moans or groans, or this is how we let our partners know what we like, but we can actually talk about it and communicate about it. One of my couples called it pillow talk, and they would just, chat about intimacy and sex and other things. Sometimes it would be other things, but I do think that last T in your heart is really important too, talking. So I like the model. I think it's really good. I'm excited about your book. That's awesome. And definitely good stuff. Lots of good information. And we could probably talk all night about all this good stuff. But so I would like to go to our centering closing exercise, as we do at this point in the podcast. And then we will come back to you in just a minute, Dr. Sohn. But so for now, as we ready ourselves to close this episode, I'd like to invite you into a brief moment of reflection, one that helps you reconnect with your body, your miraculous body, just as it is. If you're able, find a comfortable position. You can be sitting or lying down. Gently allow your eyes to close or soften your gaze, whatever's most comfortable for you. Take a slow, steady breath in and a long, easy breath out. Breathing's powerful. Let's do that again. Breathe in and gently exhale. Now bring your awareness to your body, not as something to fix, not as something to evaluate, but simply as something to notice. What sensations are present right now? Warmth, coolness, pressure, softness? Without judgment, just observe. Now gently shift your awareness to a part of your body that feels neutral or even slightly pleasant. It doesn't have to be sexual. It might be your hands, your face, your chest, your breath, your pelvic floor. It could be any of those things. A neutral or even slightly pleasant place in your body. Stay with that sensation. Let yourself be curious about it. This is where intimacy begins. Not in performance, not in expectation, but in presence, mindfulness, knowing exactly what this moment feels like. As you continue breathing, consider this gentle question. What might pleasure look like for me if I allowed it to be different? What would pleasure look like if I allowed it to be different? There's no need to answer this right away. Just let that question sit with you. Take it with you as you move forward. Take one more slow breath in. Gently exhale out. And when you're ready, gently bring your awareness back into the room. Carry that question with you. What might pleasure look like if I allowed it to be different? Well, this has been an awesome episode. What is coming up next week on Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy, Vic?
Male infertility is far more common and far more treatable than many people realize. In this episode, Dr. Jeff is joined by renowned urologist and microsurgeon Dr. Landon Trost to unpack the causes of male infertility and the evolving science behind vasectomy reversal. Together, they explore who is a good candidate for reversal, what success really means, and how factors like time since vasectomy, partner age, and surgical technique influence outcomes. Join us on April 21st at 7 p.m. Central Time to learn more.
Wow, that sperm is swimming there, Vic. You are so funny with those ticklers. They're great. But hey, and I love how, isn't it great? I mean, I really have to give kudos to Vic, Dr. Sohn. Isn't he great how he pops the slide back in there for us, how he does everything. It just works so beautifully with the episode. So Vic,
Very
kudos.
impressive. I'd love to work with you, Vic, one day. Just really take some wonderful information and make it accessible for so many people. You do a great job.
Definitely. He's got 5 different podcasts, including Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy, and they're all educational. So really good stuff, Vic. And gosh, Sarah, it's been so much fun. And I love all the great things you brought up, the curiosity, the play, the creativity, all the good stuff. What final words would you like to leave our listeners with tonight? You've given us so many great things, but what final words would you like to leave us with?
That's a great question. That your body is deserving of pleasure.
I could not agree more. I love that.
Just as it is.
Yes. Love that message. I always love to remind listeners, I know it's hard to believe this, but you are enough. You are deserving of love and belonging, and so deserving of pleasure. And pleasure can come in so many different ways, and that parfait that you talked about and all the fun ways. So think about it. Use your creativity and your play to have a great time with your partner. We thank you so much for joining us for this episode. And thank you, Dr. Sohn, for sharing your expertise. Good night.
So
Who's Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex